So here's an imaginary story, and I always have to emphasize that it's imaginary because I get halfway through and people go, "Oh, I would never do that. I would never do that. Oh, I would never do that." But it's imaginary. So use your imagination in the story. So let's imagine that you and I are in a conversation right now, and suddenly the police show up, they put me in handcuffs and they haul me off. And you're amazed, you're surprised, you're flabbergasted because you thought I was a pretty nice guy. And you don't know what's going on, but the next day you read in the newspapers that I have been arrested because of several bank robberies that I have committed and even killed some people in the process of committing those robberies. Well, you can't believe it because, well, I seemed like a pretty nice guy to you. And you're thinking about it and you're thinking, wow, I wish there was a way I could help Scott. I wish there were a way that somehow I could express to him that I believe in him and I care about him and I want to do something to help him. So you get in contact with the authorities and they tell you that I'm going to go to court. And so you have to wait and see what the outcome of that is. Well, the court comes and goes and they find me guilty on all counts. And because this happened in the state of Florida, and because I was guilty of murdering people, they sentenced me to death by execution in the electric chair. And you are just out of your mind with worry and concern for me because you're a very loving person. And because I seemed like a nice guy. But apparently I wasn't as nice as I seemed, but still, you really want to help me out. So you contact the judge and you say, Judge, is there anything I can do for Scott to get him out of his predicament? And the judge says, no. And you say, can I pay a fine on his behalf? And the judge says, no. And you say, can I take his place? And the judge says, no. And so you're walking away from the judge, and the judge says, no, wait a minute, there is one thing you can do, one thing you can do if you really care about Scott and want to see him go free. What you can do is you can give the life of your 4-year-old son. And you're like, are you crazy? No, I'm not gonna, no way. And you go home and you think about it and you wrestle in your mind and you're going back and forth and you think, I don't want to just be talking the talk. I want to prove that I really care about Scott, but that's crazy. It's too much. But now remember, this is an imaginary story. Imagine that with great struggle, you finally decide if you're going to prove your love for me instead of just talk about it. You're going to do what you can. And you go back to the judge with your 4-year-old son and you say, Judge, okay, all right. Then you find out not only does it have to be your son, you have to be the one to strap him into the chair. You have to be the one that puts the little cap on the head, and you have to be the one that pulls the switch. And you do that, and you watch your son squirm and call out, Daddy, Daddy, what are you doing? Daddy, Daddy. And you watch your son die. Now continue to use your imagination and imagine that the guards come to my cell and they open the door and they say, Scott, you are free to go because of what your friend did for you in letting his 4-year-old son die so that you can go free. And imagine I walk out of that prison cell and I go back to my life as normal. And the next day I'm sitting in a restaurant talking with a friend. And you come into the restaurant and see me, but I don't see you. And you sit in the booth right behind me and you overhear my conversation with my friend. And I don't know you're there listening, but my friend says, Scott, what happened? I read in the papers you were convicted of these crimes and you were going to die by death in the electric chair. What happened? And imagine that you hear me say these words to my friend. Well, you know what? They started looking at my record and they realized there were a lot more banks I didn't rob than banks I did, and a lot more people that I didn't kill than I did kill. And they just kind of figured I'm really a pretty nice guy after all. And so they decided to put off this execution and let me go free. Now, if you heard me say that to my friend, knowing the price you had paid so that I could go free, and knowing that I knew because the guards told you that they told me, how would you feel in that moment? How would you feel in that moment? And sometimes I wonder if God doesn't feel something of the same when he knows the price that was paid for our eternal life, when he knows that we know the price that was paid for our eternal life, and yet we continue to say, I'm not that bad. I'm really a good person. My good deeds are going to outweigh my bad deeds. Someday God's going to look and the scales are going to be tipped in my favor. A little child was heard to misquote John 3:16, but in some ways it's an accurate representation. The little child said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only forgotten son."